Hey everyone, and welcome to our November live event with National Quilter Circle. We have Colleen back to answer all of your quilting questions, so thanks for being here, Colleen.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. This is great.
Of course. So if this is your first one you've ever watched or are unfamiliar with our live events, for the next about an hour, if you have any kind of quilting related question, you can type that into the chat box and Colleen will work on answering as many of those as she can. So to start off with, obviously we just had Halloween, which I know is a big sort of sewing related Halloween holiday sometimes in terms of costumes and things like that. But now that we're going into Thanksgiving and Christmas, what are you working on?
Things that I try to find ways to have longevity for. So when we have fall things, it doesn't always have a turkey on it, just something Thanksgiving, Halloween, fallish. So things that have pumpkins on, maybe not always jack-o'-lanterns or fall leaves. But then as I get into gearing up for the Christmas season, it's kind of picking up those small projects that I want to get done for everybody, like fun pillowcases that I can pick out, novelty fabrics that really kind of speak to that individual, and some other small projects that stocking stuffer things that are fun to do, like the quick little using charm squares to make the coasters and stuff out of pieces that I maybe didn't use from other projects, but just can't bear to part with yet. So they become small projects.
Perfect. I love it. How is a quilter predominantly, I know you sew too, and I do as well, but as someone who is considers themselves predominantly a quilter, how do you come up with the non-quilted gifts and projects? You mentioned pillowcases, so I was just trying to see if there's any other ones you can think of for
pillowcases. Are a big one. Last year, the big thing that I found is I had leftover scraps of some really fun linen-y prints that I had. So I made everyone the guys didn't get these, of course, but all the women got in our group, in our family got a zipper bag for whatever they want to use it for, either cosmetics or your phone cords and charger things, everything in one place, or that catch-all bag that you just need to put a few small things in, because if you put them in the bottom of your purse, they're just gone. So everybody got one that kind of related to them, because I had pieces that had cats or dogs or flowers or a certain color. So mass producing those is really fun, because you make your first one and it always takes a little bit of time figuring out the zipper and everything on it, how you want to finish it. But when you start mass producing them, you get really fast.
Oh yeah. You're like your own little assembly line, Yeah.
I kind of felt like a little machine here. Like my ironing board was covered with all these different ones, and I was like, oh wait, I need one more. So then coordinating all the fun color zippers and things to go with them. So those small projects like that are very personal to the person you're giving it to, it's kind of been, and if you want to practice quilting on them, you could do a little bit of free motion or some straight line quilting on, but mostly just a sewing project. So
for sure. And I think because you mentioned how you personalize it to everyone, I've always been one who, me, I don't like prints. Very rarely do I even use color. So those big sort of very specific themed prints, so dogs, cats, horses, things like that, where maybe somebody doesn't want a quilt on their bed all year round with horses, but you can do smaller projects with those themed projects or themed fabric. That's perfect. Awesome. Well, speaking of projects, so there should be a banner on your screen somewhere where you're watching this video. We have a Christmas cheer quilt if you want to get right into sewing something Christmas related. And I'll show more of that quilt here later, but that is done mostly with applique. Have you done a whole lot of applique?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so if someone is a beginner and has never done any applique, what do they need to know to not be intimidated to start applique?
First off, if you're going to do, and I'm similar to you in this way, I do like to do raw edge applique. So my Heat and Bond is my favorite product, and I love to do buttonhole stitch around things. The biggest thing to do is start with something small and read the directions on the Heat and Bond. Because especially if you're in a hurry and you're making small projects or things for someone, you can overheat the bonding agent and you can kill the glue in it. So make sure that you read the iron setting and the amount of time it takes to actually fuse that, so that you don't overfuse or kill the glue on the back of it, because you can't overheat it. So that's a big deal when you're starting out. And it makes it, you create really fun projects very fast, because if I were to have to take a needle and turn that under and stitch it all down, it wouldn't happen.
I agree. I agree. When you're saying the Heat and Bond, because that's a brand that I've never. Yes. Okay. So, and I have used that one every now and then. Pellon is another one. I think it's very common at, say, your local Joann Fabrics or something like that. Are all of them created somewhat equally?
That's a good question, because they are a little bit different. There's Heat and Bond. There are some that are have two sides of paper, and the sticky agent is in the middle. So read the directions carefully on that, because like Heat and Bond and Pellon ones usually just have paper on one side, and that's the side you would draw your design or trace your design onto for cutting it out. So there are some differences in the product. So you do need to read the instructions or find a video from that product online, so that you know for sure how to approach it, because you also have to think about reversing designs. If it's, say, letters, if you're going to put an initial on something, make sure if it's an O, that's no problem. But if it's the letter C, it might turn out backwards.
Yeah.
So the little things about knowing, if you have to reverse a design or if it's already been reversed, and then how that product works, because if it's got paper on two sides or on just one side, so they all work very similarly and they all work wonderfully. It's just know which product you have in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly can't imagine doing an applique project without some sort of fusible web adhesive. But what I was going to say, you said watch a video on it. I want to point out that we do have a couple videos on National Quilters Circle. One that one of our instructors, DJ Humbach, did on, I'm going to call it, I might have the wrong term, but like a pressure sensitive repositionable one. So there are ones that they're not even going to stick at all until you hit it with an iron, but there are some where you can kind of just push it down a little bit and it's a little sticky, for lack of a better word. And so that way it can help you sort of arrange if you've got multiple layers of things you need to do, or sort of an applique that you need to assemble, you can do that first. So that's a good video to check out too. Is it bad to use your sewing scissors to cut the Heat and Bonds?
Some scissors will lose their sharpness over time. Scissors have improved. Know that. Like when I was growing up, if you picked up the fabric scissors to use on anything paper related, my mother screamed and you were shocked and you were like, no, okay, I picked up the wrong scissors. Today's scissors, I believe, are made from a little bit heavier metal, so they keep their sharpness a little longer. Some people in their sewing rooms will have scissors designated for fabric only, others to use with applique, so that if you've got that paper piece on the back of your bonding agent, that they use those scissors only on that. And then others that are strictly just for paper only. So you may end up having 3 pairs of scissors all tagged differently if you really are worried about it. I have just simply picked up my scissors and used whatever over time. I mean, you can have your favorite pair, but you can always have another.
I have a favorite pair too, and I have one that I will use more often than not on scissors, but then I'll kind of just use them all for everything, and then rotate through, and it's a reason to buy a new one or get a new one.
Exactly. You have to have something to ask for Christmas, right?
Exactly. See, so start making your lists now, everybody. New scissors. Okay, so along those same lines, people have fabric scissors meant for just fabric, meant for fabric with paper only. Rotary blades, I know, is a similar situation for a lot of people. So how would you tackle, say, a foundation paper piece project that has paper?
Yep, I actually do have a rotary cutter, a small wheel one that says paper or whatever on the handle. So that's the one I always go to, so that my other, nicer ones with a better blade that's going to be cutting fabrics and things are reserved just for fabrics. I do the same exact thing. It doesn't have to be the most expensive handle and the most expensive designed rotary cutter. If it's the one you're going to use for paper, just one that works, either a mechanism that works for your hand if you have issues with your thumb or wrist. pick one that is simple, that can be used for things that have paper on them. So again, I have one in my drawer, and it has a Sharpie mark on that says paper only or with paper. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
we collect tools. We're just like carpenters. They have assorted things in their shops, and so do we.
A tool for every job that's necessary. Yep. All right. In terms of rotary cutters, because I also have, so I have three like 45 millimeter cutters that I use at all times, and I don't necessarily have one marked for paper. Again, I just kind of use one until it's dulling, and then I set aside and I move down the line, right? But there are obviously different sizes of rotary cutters and blades and stuff as well. So when do you use what size, and why would you maybe pick one size over another?
Okay. The smaller blade, I have to think about, the 60 is the large one. There's the 45 and then the 28. The 28, the smallest one, or smaller one.
Yeah.
Because there's even a tinier one than that.
I think it's 18, isn't it?
Yeah, tiny little thing. I use those when I am going to be cutting or on templates that have curves and things. It's easier to maneuver that smaller blade on those items. Or if I'm doing paper piecing, that smaller blade I use and reserve for those things. The 45 is my go-to for most everything. That's my favorite one, and the one I have has a turquoise handle, so I can actually find it on my cutting table. I need something bright so I can find it in the mess. The 60 I have when I'm doing things like I'm cutting through fleece or puddle fabric, something that has a lot of nap to it, or if I'm cutting like multiple layers of maybe denim for a rag quilt, or multiple layers of flannel, anything that has a lot of fluff to it, because then that blade is deeper, it can sink in a little better and work on those kinds of fabrics. So kind of think about the task you're going to be using it for. Is it something very flat? Is it something kind of in between, or is it something very fluffy? And that the depth of that blade, the amount that it can go down into the fabric, it's going to tell you which is best for the task.
Absolutely. So I definitely always go with the 45 as well for cutting just fabrics. But so I was just thinking, what about, because I know you do, a lot of your own quilting, you do long arm quilting. When you are done quilting and you're going to square that up, so obviously you've got quilt top batting, backing. Is that a time where you would use a 60, or do you find 45 will work?
45 will work most of the time. If I were using double batting, so maybe I have a cotton poly batting and a wool bat, so that I'm going to have a very fluffy end product, then I would go to that bigger blade so that it can go down through that thickness and make a nice clean cut. If I'm doing maybe even a flannel quilt or something with cuddle on the back, again, I'll go to that bigger blade, heavier job, bigger blade. But most of the time, most of my quilts tend to be, well, we're going into flannel season here in Iowa and the cuddle season. So yeah, that 60 millimeter blade is going to be hanging around a lot. But most of the time, most of the year, I'm using my 45 for that trimming at the end. So
Perfect. I know we have a question that just came in, but that just you saying that coming into the flannel season, I don't think I have a flannel season in the state that I live in right now. But I was talking to my mom earlier, and she is making a quilt, and she has the quilt top, and then she was going to use something like a flannel for the back, and then put some batting in there too. And now it's almost too heavy; it's too much. So if you were to use flannel, cuddle, something like that, can you skip the batting?
You can. It kind of depends on how it's going to be used. If you're going to be sending it to Montana and they have really cold winters, you might still want to put a batting in there. And in order for it to stay flexible and not too bulky, something that you can actually pick up off the bed or drag without being too heavy, you might want to consider like a polyester batting, a really thin polyester batting. So it has some lift inside there and a little extra warmth, but it doesn't have to be. I have done quilts with just cuddle on the back, and that's enough of a cushion to create that depth when you're quilting, so you get that texture without having a batting in it. Some people want to have that stability under their piecing, something between that and maybe cuddle fabric on the back. So you can put even a simple layer of flannel in between. It just gives the piece, if it's something that's very pieced, if you want that to have a little structure, that flannel layer can be the structure in between. Also consider that if your piecing has a light cream or a white maybe as a background or an accent in it, and maybe your cuddle fabric is going to be darker or a bright color, will it change the color of your piecing? Again, that's where that layer of flannel in between or a very lightweight polyester batting can, keep that color from changing or showing through. So
Mhm.
you have to consider what your piecing is like and how the quilt's going to be used.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be putting together lots of layers like that are thick, also remember, keep your quilting somewhat loose, because the denser you quilt, the more stiff that quilt is going to end up in the end.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, here, our next question here. We were talking about applique earlier. Do you have a favorite applique stitch for your raw edge applique?
Okay. I'm in the same boat you are. I like my blanket stitch.
Okay.
Before, when I was very first starting out doing raw edge applique, my machine didn't do the blanket stitch. It could only do a zigzag, and it was a lower end machine. And yes, my parents gave it to me when I graduated from high school back in the dark ages. And its zigzag stitch wasn't very pretty. It pretty much just gobbled up the fabric. So when I went to buy a new machine, that was really high on my priority list. I wanted a machine that would do a nice blanket stitch or a buttonhole stitch, some people call it. So that was one thing that I wanted to see a demo that machine actually do. And then I could play with the size and the width and everything on it and the length of it. So the buttonhole stitch or blanket stitch is probably my go-to stitch for raw edge applique. I like the way it frames each of the pieces. Sometimes I'm matching thread, so you really don't see it, but it gives it a nice cover and keeps the applique from pulling up or fraying on the edge. Sometimes I'm framing it with a darker thread to really accent it so that it gives it almost like a color book kind of feel to it. Mm-hmm. So that was one of my priorities. The first machine I actually bought myself. That's what stitch it had to have, or it was not going to be a sale.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely my favorite stitch as well. And I have the Applique 980Q right now, and it has like 12 different applique, or blanket stitches and applique stitches and things like that. So it's definitely, that made the list. But I like why you said you either match your color or you accent it to, highlight darker or lighter. So I was going to show a little bit. This is the Christmas cheer quilt part of it. So if you click the banner and you download the pattern, you'll get the fabric requirements right away, and there is a full photo of everything. But all of these is applique, and I did the same thing. I did some, matching thread on the snowflake, some contrasting on the reindeer, but there's all sorts of fun Christmas holiday shapes on here. Perfect for making a big quilt, or we were talking about those smaller projects earlier. Just pick your favorite applique shapes if you don't feel like you have time to do it all, and, put one on a smaller project. So, and use the blanket stitch. All right, our next one here. Someone says that they are looking forward to making hot bowl pads and star pads in the colder months. Have you ever made one of those?
Yeah. In fact, when I got up this morning, my Marine is visiting on leave, and sometime after 10 o'clock, he had another bowl of chicken noodle soup. And when I got up this morning, the bowl koozie was underneath of his cup. So when he got it out of the microwave, he slid it in there so he could carry it.
Perfect.
When you go to make those, make sure that you use 100% cotton batting. Wrap and Zap, I believe, is one of the products out there. I'm trying to remember. There's another company that makes one too that's made to be used in a microwave. You don't want anything with polyester. Make sure your thread is 100% cotton also, because you don't want all that work and then something melting. That would be bad.
But, and I can't think of the brand, but there is one on even. I was actually at Hobby Lobby the other day, and they have it there, and it even says on it like microwave safe or meant for. Yeah, so definitely look for that one. And we do have a video on National Quilter Circle where I show how to make a bowl one. So if you're another good quick and easy holiday gift, and you can make multiple sizes and give them as a bundle.
And the first one is a learning curve, and the second, the third, and fourth get so fast.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, next one here. Katie Wilson says, hello, I'm new to quilting. Hopefully this will help a different world. Are there any starter projects to help get her going?
Oh, okay. Read as much as you possibly can. quilting has its own language in a way because we use acronyms. When you're reading a pattern, you're going to see FQ and you're going to see WOF and all these things. Learn as much as you can about how we abbreviate things so that when you go to read a pattern, it makes sense. Start with things that don't have a lot of pieces. Practice with a rotary cutter before you get started. That's, those skills that you can pick up will make your piecing go together nicely. Understand the need for pressing and not ironing, and ask questions. There are no dumb questions in the quilt world. Only the one that's not asked.
The one that's not asked that you then have to like answer yourself by trial and error and that one.
Seam rippers are good, but they can be frustrating. So all of us were beginners once, and we enjoy our craft so much that I have no problem sharing tips and ideas with people. And like I've always said, when I've worked in shops, there are no dumb questions, only those not asked. So, we love to share it. And so please ask whenever you have some, an issue. Find a forum, ask in a local quilt shop if hopefully they're open in your area. If you know another quilter, more than likely she will give you more answers than you ever.
They'll be like, all right, that's enough now. Thank you. I'll come back later. That's perfect. I like the pointing out the acronym part because, if you and I both have, garment sewing, we've done commercial garment patterns, and they have, at the very beginning of every pattern, a sort of glossary of everything. But quilt patterns don't really have that. So definitely, but I will say across the board, everyone's pretty consistent in terms of no one's throwing out weird acronyms. Usually they're all about the same. So once you kind of get them down, they're not going to be as surprising as when you see them all for the first time.
Exactly.
All right, next one here. If an applique pattern is not printed at 100%, what do I do to set my applique up so my machine's digital embroidery program will stitch with accuracy?
Because I'm not an embroidery person. Yikes. You're gonna need to talk to someone who's more acute, has more experience in the digital applique, I'm afraid.
So, and I'm thinking, I've only one time done any kind of something like this, and that's if you buy certain dyes from AccuQuilt, like their applique ones, they come with the files that you can put on your embroidery machine that will perfectly stitch. So, I mean, not that I'm just going to say go ask them, but maybe they would know. I'm not sure. Because at least, when you're getting something like that, that file fits that die, which is, you're not changing the size of that at all. So,
and like companies like Kimberbell too, I know when you get the discs with all of their appliques and the stitching that goes with those, that you would have a matching file for size. So if you're trying to incorporate, I don't know enough about the applique process of the machine. If you have to change something to 100%, I'm assuming that if it's like a file or a design that came in a magazine and you have to increase it to 100%, you're going to have to take that to if you can do it yourself, or take it to a printer and say, okay, I need this to get to. And they are used to looking at those things and they can take it to the right percentage.
Exactly. Or even the other way around, if you know that what you just printed off was 70%, then, I mean, I know on my embroidery machine, I can, on certain designs, size it up and down by a certain small percentage. I can't go from like 100 to 2. Like you can't, go way big or little, but you can do a little bit. So if you only have to go up or down a little, you might be able to do that sort of within your, I'm going to call it this on-screen edit function, of your embroidery machine. So play around with that, but then, definitely I would reach out to one of the companies that does specifically that.
Exactly.
All right. Marcia says, that she likes to use her old or used rotary blades for cutting paper. So perfect, like what we were saying earlier.
Yeah, give them as much life as you possibly can before they go away.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of go away, how do you dispose of your rotary blades?
Um, that's always
How are
been
you
kind of
supposed to?
an issue because you don't want anyone to get injured by them.
Yeah.
What I have done in the past is taken I guess though I had to have an empty package at the time, but an empty container that they came in and write used on. So all the used ones go in there. And then when it's full and I can't put more in it, I usually duct tape it shut so that it goes away and it's not sharp on the outside. If I don't have a package for it, I've wrapped it in corrugated cardboard and taped around that to dispose of it, just because I don't want someone either going through garbage or somewhere in a sorting system for someone to, get injured with it. So I've usually tried to encase it in something so that injury is less likely.
Yes, I agree. I definitely do I save those little pieces of cardboard from when you buy fat quarters, right? And like wrapped that around it and taped it. And then I usually try to just take it like right out to the dumpster because I'm like notorious for not wanting to empty the trash and trying to like shove it down, to get more in there. And you definitely don't want to obviously have a blade in there for that. So.
And you have little people in your house. You don't want to just put it in your wastebasket.
I know.
If you have young children in your house or pets. So you want that out of the house and, as far from harms.
Absolutely. I've got all of those things, a 3-year-old, an 8-month-old, and 2 dogs. So this is the only hour of quiet time in my sewing room I get. So thank you. Okay. Our next question here, Jenna asks, I've been quilting for a year and still need to find the area that I'm best at. How do you find your quilting calling, so to speak?
Trial and error.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's hard to say that, but trial and error really ends up being because you have to practice at things before you really acquire a skill. I mean, when you were in grade school, you didn't pick up a pencil and write your name perfectly the very first time. You practiced, you had class, you went over and over. So picking up skills along the way, taking a few classes. I mean, if it's an online class, there's all kinds of great things through National Quilter Circle that you can watch that you can pause and start again and help pick up some skills there. Everybody struggles with different points. So realize that you are in good company. A lot of people say, I love to piece. I hate coordinating fabric. So they find a quilt shop where there's someone that will help them. And, they'll jump in and when I've worked in shops and still do, I always tell the customer, you have the right of first refusal. If I put something out there, you go, what were you thinking? You can always take it back out. I will throw in as many possibilities and let you find your comfort zone there when it comes to color, because color and texture and design are hard for a lot of people. The piecing tends to advance fairly quickly because you're drawn to create. You probably like your machine, so the piecing tends to go fairly good. Getting them quilted is a whole nother game. Sometimes it just comes down to admitting that you like to make tops and someone else will quilt them. Or
that is me.
Or you will do very simple quilting, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with stitch in the ditch or outlining or straight line quilting. Those are all sufficient, and they are very classic. So don't feel bad if that's the kind of quilting you end up doing. And if you find a quilter you like to send them off to, more power to you then. But everybody eventually, over time, it may take 2 or 3 years to really find the portion you like. And eventually you may end up liking all of those. You may really love the design and the color and the texture. And then the piecing is bringing it to life. And then the quilting is putting that last touch on it. But don't feel bad if you don't love all of the parts. That's how all quilters are.
Exactly. And I feel like even if you love all parts, there's going to be something that you don't like. So it's like, I love design and I like picking fabrics and I love piecing. And then I do love to send it to someone else to get it quilted. And I also love to have her bind it too. So those are two of my least favorite things. But then it's also like, you're going to find, do you like traditional piecing? I like traditional looking things. Some people like modern. Do you like applique? Do you like paper piecing, traditional paper piecing, English paper piecing. I mean, there's so many like different little subcategories that you might as well try out all of them.
Dabble in
And
all of it. And sadly, I love all of it.
I love all of it except for the whole, you know, those other two little things. The two, you know, I don't know, that make it to where you can actually finish and use your quilts. Those ones I don't like. All right, our next one here. Wendy says, my sewing machine went out and I'm looking to upgrade to something that does quilting. Is there a recommendation that you have?
When you go to look for sewing machines that you're going to be doing free motion quilting or even straight line quilting on, make sure that you can get as much depth on the throat of the machine as possible, because you're going to be maneuvering a quilt into there. Now, if you're only making baby quilts, most machines will suffice. But if you like to make bed-sized quilts, if you like to make anything past a full, you're going to need as much space to maneuver with that machine as possible. Try out machines. Sit down to it. Hopefully you can find some place where there is a salesperson who will let you sit and play with the machine a little and see if it's comfortable for you, if the buttons are in the places that are logical for you. Price point, know how much you want to spend before you go, because the sky's the limit on sewing machines anymore. It's
more than some cars, you know.
Yeah. Can be. So, don't have buyer's remorse because you bought way more than you will ever use or can afford. You really do kind of need to stay in your own comfort zone, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, think about what you have to have in a machine. Like for me, it was, I needed enough throat space. I wanted the buttonhole stitch. I wanted variable needle position, because if I'm doing blanket stitch, I wanted to be able to vary that some. Maybe a table extension will also help with free motion quilting. So an extension that goes around that machine that increases that base size. So take all those things into consideration, shop around, talk to other quilters in your area. Tech support is also a really big thing. If there is someone in your area that when you get stuck or you have an issue, it's nice to have that tech support of someone you feel comfortable talking to. So I would put that high on the list too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know, okay, so you mentioned for your machine, you wanted that throat space, but I know you just got a long arm. So if you're somebody that, is thinking, okay, down the road, I would like a long arm, or, I don't plan to do that part. Now that you have the long arm, would you step back in size of throat space? Or like once you have the bit, are you just kind of used to it now and you don't want to go in reverse?
Well, the machine that I have is kind of in the middle. It's not the very largest machine. It's not it doesn't have the deepest throat space on it. So it is kind of a middle of the road. I can do up to a baby quilt comfortably on it, but then everything else pretty much goes to the long arm now. So I've never been one to drag a large quilt through my machine. It always seemed too daunting, more than I wanted to take on. And I didn't want to wreck my quilt. I mean, if you make a pretty top and then, have issues dragging it through your machine, that seems, kind of defeats the purpose of putting all your work into a top. So know your abilities, know how you want things to look when you're finished, and, stay within your budget, sadly.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. A good little tip here. Becky says that you should be able to dispose of rotary blades in a sharps box at a doctor's office or hospital. So
Sure.
Could be a thing you could look into. Our next question here is one I definitely have never asked you before, and we've never had this on a live event, so I'm very excited about a new question. What are the best non-stink fabrics? I'm making a pet quilt, and I want it to stay fresh for as long as possible.
Oh, that is really an interesting question, because I don't think I've ever.
I had to read it twice, honestly. I was like, I don't think I've ever smelled my fabrics. I don't know.
You would have to ask my husband, because he thinks fabrics do have a smell, and I have never noticed that. Maybe it's because the smell of fabric to me means design, quilts.
Yeah.
No. I think that. I don't want to say this. I'll say it politely. Fabrics are a little higher quality tend to have a little less chemical smell to them. I have noticed more chemical smells in fabrics that are lower quality. And I don't know if it's because of the extra starch and the sizing that's put on them in order to get them nice and flat to put on a bolt, because they tend to be very crispy. They tend to have a little bit more odor to them. But if you're making something for a pet, I guess most people's pets are their babies. So I would just buy good fabric. I mean,
Yeah.
because the higher quality fabric will last longer. The color will stay longer. It'll be a stronger fabric. If you're going to put that work into it, I would go with quality fabric and pre-wash, so that if there's any sizings or anything that has any kind of a smell to it, then I would stay in that, washing it. I might avoid batiks. Batiks do have a little bit more chemical smell.
Okay.
I have previously worked with somebody who did have issues when she was putting away batik fabrics, or we had to work in that department very long, or a section, that her hands would break out. So there is a chemical in batiks that may cause a little bit more irritation for especially animals that have really sensitive smell issue. They can detect smell really strong. So stay with the cotton fabric, stay away from batik.
Yep.
Maybe.
And to just second a reason for getting that higher quality, good quality fabric, they generally tend to be tighter weave, so you figured less dander and hair and stuff is going to get down into that fabric, which could make it start smelling dingy quicker or something. So just all in all, whenever possible, buy that high quality fabric. Yep.
Exactly.
So because you mentioned this earlier, if you said if the quilt shops in your area are open, and I know yours is obviously because you were working here. The quilt shop in where I live has not been open for months. So I either can drive pretty far away to get fabric, or I'm stuck ordering online. So I know in my personal preference, I like to feel the fabric, and that's how I decide good quality and not good quality. Online, how do you do that? How do you assess fabric quality?
That can be an issue. Looking for brand names, knowing that what fabrics, what companies' fabrics you find in quilt shop versus those that are in the lower end stores. So stay with, if you want higher quality. Sadly, I mean, it's not bad, but Moda tends to have high quality fabric. It's just they have high end prints. Their color is very vivid. They have great selection, and they have a lot of really great designers. But then there are other fabric companies also. Riley Blake, Michael Miller. There's just so many different designers. But if you can find the company that lists the designer or the company name that produced it, say it's Maywood or Wilmington or, oh my gosh, now I can't think of all these different companies. But those that you find in quilt shops, those brands are going to be a little higher quality, what we call gray goods. That's the base fabric that the design is printed on. That's a little stronger, a little tougher, a little thicker. Those ones that you may order from a lower end company are going to be that looser weave, the ones that you can kind of see through when you hold them to the light. They're good for beginner. I mean, I don't really say anything negative against it, because it's good for practicing on. And if you're doing something that isn't going to be washed a lot, maybe you're making a wall hanging that's going to be used just for Valentine's, and you find this really cute print it's a lower end fabric, but yet it works for what you're making. So, I mean, we have the whole wide range, but the quilt shops that are out there that sell fabric, if you can find that brand on it, so you know who the designer is or who the company that manufactured it, then you kind of have a way to gauge its quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you threw out Moda first, because even in the quilt behind me, all the colors, which we know me, I usually stray away from those, but those are all Moda grunge, which is like my favorite. I would probably use it on like everything if I could. So yeah.
And our shop carries all of them.
Perfect.
Colors. You would be in hog heaven.
I should just move to Iowa next, because my quilter is there as well. You're there, your quilt shop, so driving distance to NQC. We'll see. Anyway, the next one here is another good tip. So Diane says that she puts fabric softener sheets in her pet beds that she makes to keep them smelling nice for longer.
That's
That is a good idea.
good idea.
I should just start putting fabric softeners around my dog's collars and just.
Think that'll help.
There's not enough fabric softeners. No, so speaking of just fabric softeners, things like that. So we talk a lot about pre-washing, pre-shrinking. We don't always do it, but when it comes to fabric softeners or the detergent you're using or things like that, I know we've talked about color catchers, in case you're worried that your fabric is going to bleed, but do you stay away from any specific soaps or detergents when washing quilts?
I haven't in the past. And I'm talking about washing newer quilts. I mean, I'm always cold water washing, not a lot of detergent, because unless your quilt is really soiled, it really doesn't need a lot of detergent. It just needs something to maybe freshen it up, reduce, remove any, oils from her hands or hair if it's been used on a bed or whatever. If it's an old quilt, say something that is a couple of generations back, I would probably be purchasing the quilt soap from a quilt shop or an online shop, because those don't have as much phosphates in them. They're a little gentler on the fibers, especially if they're older fabrics and you don't know for sure what the color fastness on things are. So I would go to those specifically made for quilts if it's an older quilt, just to be gentle on those fibers. Heavily washing a quilt, I don't wash them very often. Even if they're on a bed, they only get maybe twice in a season. And make sure you're always at cold water wash so you don't, do any damage to the colors and stuff. I do know that some people really like to wash bedding quite often, but quilts, they take a beating when they get washed a lot over and over. So it lengthens the life of them if it's cold water washed, and not quite so often. So
yeah. And then follow up on that, because you did say they do take a beating, and I know I've heard of previous people talk about never washing a quilt in a washer that agitates or has the thing in the middle, unless you can turn that off, or just hand washing. Like, I know it's a big thing, but this person would be talking about filling up a bathtub, right, and hand washing in there. So,
and I've done it. They get heavy. You have to figure out a way to get it out of the tub and get most of the water back out. But it is best for those older quilts not to be agitated. Yeah, because a lot of our newer washers, they're front load sometimes, or now they're the open drum, so they don't have that spindle in the middle that really tugs and pulls on the fibers of the quilt. That's what the batting and the backing and all that quilting stitching is, holding it all together when it's being laundered. So take those into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for answering all of our quilting questions. And again, I want to remind anyone that wants to start stitching up a Christmas cheer quilt that you can download the fabric requirements right now. So as soon as you sign up, you can get fabric requirements, and it's going to be released over the course of a week. And the first set of instructions comes out on the 18th. So you have plenty of time to sign up, get fabric requirements, get your fabric, and then get ready to go. So super fun. Maybe you'll do some raw edge applique with us, Colleen, and join in. But thank you again for being here, and we'll see you again probably next month.
Okay. Take care.